Hart is putting a pause on their group. The trio released a statement on the Facebook page saying that they are going to focus on their solo career.
They walked onto the biggest talent stage in America with no record deal, no label backing, and no one in that audience who had ever heard their name. Then something happened that had only occurred once before in the entire history of the show. All 4 judges, plus the host, stopped everything and gave them a golden buzzer that wasn't even supposed to exist anymore. The crowd lost its mind. Dolly Parton herself tweeted about them. Overnight, Hart became a household name. But 3 years later, the group is gone. The band is broken. And the real story of what tore them apart is far messier than anything they ever sang about. The audition. Nobody saw coming. Here's something most people don't know. Hart almost never showed up to AGT at all. By the summer of 2022, the trio, sisters Danica and Devin Hart, and their cousin Treya Swindle, had already been grinding for nearly a decade. They were based out of New Orleans, playing bars, fairs, and small outdoor stages across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. No major label, no radio play, just 3 women from Poplarville, Mississippi, doing it completely on their own terms. They had actually been lined up to tour with the Indigo Girls that summer. But the tour fell through when one of the Indigo Girls members was diagnosed with COVID-19. That cancellation left a gap in their schedule, and that gap is the only reason an AGT producer named Lindsay Rush was able to get their attention. Rush had been chasing the group for weeks. They kept saying no. Danica later said on Bobby Bones's iHeart radio show that they were nervous and unsure. A talent competition didn't feel like the right move. But Rush didn't back down. She kept calling, kept pushing, until eventually the group caved. What they performed that night was an original song called You Can Have Him, Jolene, a direct response to Dolly Parton's 1973 classic. The premise was simple but sharp. It's been 50 years. Why are we still fighting over the same man? Let him go. The crowd was on their feet before the song was even halfway through. What happened next had only been done once before in the show's entire history. Every golden buzzer for that season had already been used up. Technically, there was nothing left to give. But the judges huddled. Terry Crews walked over and joined them. The audience started chanting. And then, together, all 5 of them hit the buzzer at the same time, sending a shower of gold confetti onto 3 women who had spent years being told country music didn't look like them. Dolly Parton saw the clip and tweeted about it. Tanya Tucker praised them publicly. Darius Rucker reached out personally. Within days, that audition had racked up millions of views online. The name Hart was everywhere. But here's what the cameras didn't show. What was already quietly building behind the scenes that would, 3 years later, tear the whole thing apart. Where they actually came from. Before the golden confetti, before the tweets from Dolly, there were years of doing everything the hard way. Hart officially came together in 2014, taking their name from 2 things that defined them: the church chapel where they first learned to sing, and the Hart family name that tied all 3 of them together. They grew up in Poplarville, Mississippi, a town of around 3,000 people, where family gatherings and church music weren't just cultural. They were the foundation everything else was built on. The Hart family alone had over 100 members, and the 3 cousins had been harmonizing together since they were kids. Danica, born in 1987, was the oldest and the one who shaped the group's sound most directly. A big, soulful voice that one journalist at the Houston Chronicle compared to Etta James, with clear influences from Dolly Parton and the Chicks. Trea Swindle, born in 1985, was the writer, the one who pushed the artistic direction forward. She had attempted solo work before Chapel Hart, but hadn't broken through. Devin Hart, the youngest, born in 1993, had the most formal vocal training and had competed in talent competitions before the group came together. The group was originally called Hyperfly, yes, spelled exactly like that, before eventually settling on Chapel Hart. From 2014 to around 2020, they operated in near total obscurity. They self-funded everything: recording, production, travel. Devin worked at a grocery store during those early years just to help keep the group financially alive. In 2018, the whole thing almost collapsed entirely due to money pressure. A chance performance in Nashville caught the ear of a producer named Jeff Glicksman, a name that will come up again in a very different context later, and he stepped in as their manager and producer, which stabilized things enough for them to keep going. By 2020, things were slowly starting to move. They released a song called Jesus and Alcohol, and a track featuring ZZ Top guitarist Billy Gibbons, which got airplay on CMT. CMT then selected them for their Next Women of Country class of 2021, the same program that had previously spotlighted Kelsey Ballerini, Ashley McBride, and Gabby Barrett. Their song, You Can Have Him Jolene, already existed as an independent release before AGT. They had put it out themselves in 2021. Nobody outside their fan base paid much attention at the time. What AGT gave them wasn't the song. They already had the song. What it gave them was an audience of millions who hadn't been looking for them yet. The cost of blowing up overnight. Going from zero to viral in 48 hours sounds like a dream. For Chapel Hart, it was also the beginning of a grind that would slowly take its toll in ways nobody was writing about. Right after the AGT finale, where they finished 5th overall, the opportunities came fast. They made their Grand Ole Opry debut on September 17, 2022, and were introduced to the stage by country legend Jeannie Seely, who was celebrating her 55th year as an Opry member. They received 3 standing ovations that night. 3 for a debut. The crowd packed in behind them included more than a few members of the actual Hart and Swindle families, which made the whole thing feel less like a music industry moment and more like something that had been a long time coming for an entire community. Trea Swindle told the Tennessean afterward that she'd need a defibrillator added to the tour rider if they kept getting ovations like that. Meanwhile, Loretta Lynn, who passed away just weeks later in October of that same year, had personally asked the group to write a response to her 1968 song, Fist City. That request, made before her death, became the basis for the group's 2023 single, Welcome to Fist City. Getting a direct creative commission from Loretta Lynn is not something that happens to most artists. It speaks to just how quickly the country music establishment had taken notice of them. Darius Rucker pulled them onto his song Old Church Hymn, released September 30th, 2022, his first solo album in years. Marty Stewart praised them. Gretchen Wilson reached out. Dolly Parton, Tanya Tucker, Billy Gibbons. The list of country music heavyweights publicly backing Chapel Hart in the fall of 2022 was remarkable for a group that had no major label deal and had been playing bars across the Gulf South just months earlier. Then, in late October of 2022, just weeks after the Opry debut, Danica underwent vocal cord surgery and was placed on complete vocal rest. The timing was brutal. They were at the absolute peak of their momentum, and their lead singer couldn't make a sound. Danica shared the news directly with fans through a Facebook post from her hospital bed, saying she hadn't wanted to keep it private because the fans had been with them through everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this wasn't going to be any different. She recovered over the following weeks, and the group returned to the stage for a December show in Biloxi, followed by a Grand Ole Opry appearance just days later. Once she was back, they moved fast. In January of 2023, they released the single Glory Days, co-written with veteran Nashville songwriter Jim Beavers, and launched their first-ever headlining tour off the back of it. The Glory Days tour was not a small operation. It hit over 60 cities across the United States and Canada: Wichita, Lincoln, Springfield, New Orleans, New York City, Atlanta, Nashville, Jackson, and dozens of smaller markets in between. Country singer Lucas Hogue joined as direct support for the first leg. For a group that had previously been playing county fairs and small bars, performing in theaters across that many markets in that short a window was a legitimate leap. Their full album, also called Glory Days, came out in May of 2023 to solid critical reception. Reviewers pointed to the vocal harmonies, the 90s country influence, and the consistency of their songwriting across 12 tracks. Internationally, they had already earned the title of International Group of the Year in Scotland, along with International Song of the Year for You Can Have Him, Jolene. They were also nominated in multiple categories by the British CMAs. In early 2024, they returned to AGT for the Fantasy League spin-off, this time drafted onto Simon Cowell's team, and made it to the semifinals before being eliminated. In one of the more revealing moments of that period, Danica told the Tennessean in a December 2023 interview that the wins were real, but so were the gaps. She said that even with their names in conversations across the industry, they still had no record deal, no publishing deal, and no sponsorships. They were still out there busting their tails. That candid admission from the lead singer of a group that had just come off a 60-plus city headlining tour tells you everything about how uneven the music industry's support for them actually was. By early 2024, the cracks nobody could see from the outside were forming in earnest. What really happened? The fallout no one expected. On July 2nd, 2025, Danica Hart posted something to Facebook that stopped people cold. She wrote that she had stayed silent for months, but could no longer keep quiet. She said she and other members of their team had been subjected to physical violence and abuse. She said she was at a breaking point. She said her intention had been to finish out the scheduled dates, but given the circumstances, she no longer felt safe or supported enough to continue. Then it got more specific. She said she had received a message the night before the post, telling her that if she didn't sign a document typed up by their manager Jeff Glicksman, the same Glicksman who had discovered them in Nashville years earlier, along with Treya Swindle and Devin Hart, by midnight, the other two would simply continue performing under the Chapel Hart name without her. She was being squeezed out of the group she co-founded, and the ultimatum had a clock on it. She ended the post by asking for attorneys with experience in band contract law to reach out to her. The post spread fast. Fans who had followed Chapel Hart since the AGT days were stunned, not just by the severity of what she was describing, but by the fact that publicly, Chapel Hart had always presented as an airtight family unit. These were cousins and sisters. They had built this thing together from nothing. The image of them in that Opry dressing room, holding hands and praying before stepping on stage for their debut, was still fresh in people's minds. What happened next made things messier. Within days of the post going up, fans began directing threats toward Devin and Treya. On July 7th, Danica posted again, this time asking her own supporters to stop threatening her bandmates. 3 days after that, on July 10th, she deleted the original post and issued a public apology, stating that the group would continue together and complete their remaining dates. But something had clearly shifted. The group went quiet publicly for nearly 2 months. Then, on August 25, 2025, all 3 members posted the same statement simultaneously across their social media accounts, a joint message that was carefully worded, warm in tone, and unmistakably final. They talked about shared memories, a bond deeper than music, new seasons of life. The official framing was a hiatus, not a breakup. But buried inside that same announcement was the confirmation that Danica was going solo, and that Devin and Treya were forming a new duo called Magnolia Rising. The group honored their remaining 2 scheduled dates, an August 29th show in Stockbridge, Georgia, and their appearance at the Keep It Country Festival in Wolverhampton, United Kingdom, at the end of October. Those 2 shows were the last Chapel Hart performances on record. The curtain came down quietly in a British festival field, with no dramatic send-off, no reunion moment, just the end of something that had started more than a decade earlier in a small Mississippi town. What exactly happened behind those closed doors? Who did what to whom? Whether any legal action was ever taken over the contract dispute, and how a family that had prayed together before every show arrived at a midnight ultimatum. None of that has ever been explained publicly. The full picture remains incomplete. 3 roads forward. The story didn't end in that British festival field. It just split into 3. Magnolia Rising, Devin Hart, and Treya Swindle moved quickly after the announcement. They launched new social media pages, posted a short message saying they had walked through fire and come out stronger, and released their debut single Hit the Ground in November of 2025, followed shortly by a second track called Dream Running. Their stated direction leans toward a harder, rock-styled outlaw country sound, something different from the Chapel Hart blueprint. Treya confirmed in interviews that Little Big Town's Philip Sweet was among their first big-name songwriting collaborators. The duo is building from scratch, but they're not starting from zero. They're carrying the fan base and the industry relationships that Chapel Hart spent 11 years accumulating. Danica's path has looked different. Her first solo release came on Thanksgiving Day, November 27, 2025, a song called Amazing Grace, which she described as her testimony. It wasn't a straight cover of the hymn, but rather a blend of the original and her own reflection on what she called one of the hardest times of her life. She had already been teasing it through her Open Heart sessions, a series of small, intimate acoustic shows at venues across Mississippi, where she performed original music, told the stories behind the songs, and connected directly with audiences in a way that the bigger Chapel Hart shows hadn't always allowed. She told one local television station that the response from Mississippi in particular had been overwhelming, that people were just showing up and wrapping their arms around her. She kicked off her full 2026 solo tour on January 30th at Ground Zero Blues Club in Biloxi, the same venue where Chapel Hart had performed a holiday show back in 2022, not long after their Opry debut. A full solo album is in progress, with a target release of 2026. She hasn't announced a title, but she's described the music as wrapped in Southern goodness and honesty, which honestly could have been the tagline for Chapel Hart all along. What's worth noting is what all 3 of them are not doing. Nobody is publicly relitigating what happened. Nobody is giving detailed interviews about the July posts, the contract dispute, the allegations, or the months that followed. Treya said in one statement that she hoped the Chapel Hart social pages could eventually become a space where both Danica's solo work and Magnolia Rising could share a twin billing, a remarkably generous framing from someone who was named by the other party in a public abuse allegation just weeks earlier. Whether that kind of grace is genuine, strategic, Or just the standard country music politeness that tends to smooth over everything behind closed doors? It's hard to say from the outside. What is clear is that all three are still making music, still drawing audiences, and still leaning on the identity that Chapel Hart gave them. The legacy they're each working from is real and documented. Over the course of their run together, Chapel Hart received 3 standing ovations on their Grand Ole Opry debut. Loretta Lynn personally commissioned them to write a response to one of her most iconic songs. They were named International Group of the Year and International Song of the Year in Scotland. Dolly Parton publicly blessed their audition. In one calendar year alone, 2023, they made 160 domestic performance dates alongside global festival appearances, released a full album, and earned public praise from multiple country music Hall of Famers. They did all of that without a major record deal, without a publishing deal, and without the structural support the industry routinely offers artists who look and sound more like what country music has historically expected. Danica Hart, Devin Hart, Treya Swindle, 3 cousins from Poplarville, Mississippi, with a population of 3,000. They don't share a stage anymore. The name Chapel Hart now belongs to memory and streaming catalogs. But what they built and what it cost them is a story that says as much about the music industry as it does about the 3 of them. What do you think about what happened to Chapel Hart? Share with us in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going. If this story was moving for you, smash that like button, subscribe for more untold Hollywood tales, and hit the bell so you never miss a drop. Want more? Check out another one of our videos. Thanks for watching.